Hey guys, Kid of Mischief here, and today I am going to show you how to make some featherless foam angel wings. These are made with 0 real feathers and just some craft foam and some fur. So here we go. First I started out by drafting my pattern. I used a piece of paper the size of the thicker foam that I've had for the base of the wings. Next, I used another piece because I knew that shape kind of reminded me more of My Little Pony versus angel wings, so I had them droop down a little bit. It's up to you. You can make your shape however you want. Next, I put the pattern on top of the foam and then I drew over it with a pen to make it easier to cut out. I used an X-Acto knife to cut out the pieces. You can use some scissors, whatever's easiest for you. And if you don't have pieces of foam big enough, you can literally take pieces and just piece them together into the shape that you need. I use Gorilla hot glue, so it helps keep it a whole lot more sturdier than regular hot glue. Next, make your second wing. I like to do each pieces in order so I can make sure that they're pretty much the exact same versus making one whole wing and then trying to match it with the other. And now we have the base shape that I wanted, and make sure constantly that they're the exact same shape. Next, I cut out some feather shapes, made sure that it's the size that I wanted, and then I laid down my foam and then drew a bunch of feathers. I try to draw them as close as possible so I can get my worth out of the foam, you know. And just cut them out. Next, I heated it up so it's a little softer, and I pushed a groove where the feather vein is going to be. I don't know what else to call that, and then next I took an X-Acto knife. You can again do this with scissors, whatever's easiest for you. And I made the feather frills and heated it up and shaped them into feathers. I place them all out before I start gluing, make sure that they fit how I want, and I use just a little bit on the back and then start gluing them on. Don't forget the back. Next, I took some organza and folded it where I can cut multiple feathers out at a time. These don't have to be super perfect, but try to make them look nice. They're just going to be some filler, so then your feathers have a little bit more dimension. I then glued them between each feather. Sometimes I would glue 2 pieces, sometimes I would glue 1. Depends on how you want it to look. Next, I realized I didn't quite like the shape, so I fixed that. You can always go back, you know. I then took some copper wire. You can buy thicker wire if you want, whatever's easiest for you, but this is what I got. I ended up needing to layer it 4 times total to hold the wings, but it was easier to bend, so that's why I got this one. After I bent the wire into the shape around the top, I then started hot gluing it. Now be careful because the hot glue makes the wire a little hotter further down too, so you might toast your fingers a bit, so just be careful. Next, I took some smaller pieces of foam or thinner pieces of foam, and I covered all of the wire. Just looks nicer and hopefully nothing pops out. Well, you're gonna cover it with fur anyways, but either way, it helps keep the wire on it better. See, I have it all covered and secured on in there. And then I glued the pieces together and then covered the seam with some thin pieces of foam. It also helps keep them together so the wings aren't relying on just one point of contact. Next, I made slightly smaller feathers. These ones, you do the same exact thing, but I ended up just cutting it with scissors this time after I layered them on top of each other. It makes it easier, but I still took each one separately and cut a few off to give it a little more texture. And same as before, just start placing them, but start placing them at more of an angle versus downwards. Same with the organza. Next, make even smaller feathers for the top. Also, this whole time, do not forget to constantly be going back and forth between the front and the back of the wings. Also, with the back of the wings, I didn't do this smaller feather layer because the back's going to have a little bit more of the furry floof versus the front. You'll see. Next, I'm going to make the part of the base that ends up sliding into a corset. I definitely recommend a corset because these wings do get a bit heavy and you need something sturdy to hold it in. A bra or a strap ain't gonna cut it. So I made this triangle that I'm going to then glue on to the back. And again, you can see that I did a few layers of the copper wire. I end up going back later and doing a few more layers because it wasn't sturdy enough. Then I seal it in with the craft foam. Now here's the back, and you can see that I didn't do as high up with the smaller feathers like I mentioned. And then I'm going to mark off what I'm going to need to cut, and I start cutting it. I cut the back of the fur with an X-Acto knife so then you don't cut any of the fur and it's not all choppy. Start gluing it on. some of it came over, so just trim it, and then I started gluing some of the fiber down onto the top of the wings so then you can't see the future seam when you start gluing the front too. This time I glued it top to bottom since I can't really trim it. Just gluing the top and squishing the fibers together so then you can't see the seam. This part's not completely necessary since it's going on your back, but why not? Next I took some white knit fabric, you can take any kind of soft fabric, and I started wrapping the copper wire with it. Not only does it help keep it together and sturdier, but it's also a lot softer on your back. Here's what I mentioned earlier, the extra piece, because that little thing was not going to cut it by holding the wings up. So hopefully you guys don't make that mistake, but if you do, here's how you fix it. You just glue them together, cover it, and this time instead of more fur so it wasn't bulky, I ended up covering it with some craft foam again. I glued some knit fabric over it so it's not just craft foam on. If it's theoretically on your direct back, the knit's going to be nicer than the craft foam too. And there you have it. Now that copper wire that we put on top of the wings can help to keep your wings either straight or folded over. I like the folded over look, personally. Up to you. But yeah, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please check out my horns and tail one for like the counterpart demon. And yeah, that one's posted on my YouTube already. So thank you, and thank you my patron supporters for helping make stuff like this happen. Thank you for the lady that commissioned it. We will see that later. And yeah. Alright, cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.